All right, so part 3 is talking about the coding process. Now that I've talked to you about the tools that you can use, what exactly are you doing? Some of you have already learned this in research methods or in another social class. So if you know that, great. You should still review this lecture, but hopefully it's a refresher. So we're basing this off of Sharma's from 2006 and 2010. She's one of the leading qualitative sociologists, I guess, in terms of qualitative research methods. So coding literally means to name segments of data with a label that categorizes, summarizes, and accounts for each piece of data. So we're literally trying to label the data. And so this process probably started or should have started with your reflections during data collection and the transcription, as you're hearing themes that are starting to emerge, maybe commonalities or things that are important in what people are saying. The goal here as you code is to identify concepts, patterns, and relationships in the data. So again, you're literally organizing and naming your data, and in terms of what they're saying, what are they saying, what are they saying. And remember that you want to stay attuned to your research question here. What are you trying to answer? That is your goal. Keep that in mind. You might want to stay attuned, or you should stay attuned to unexpected ideas, but try not to go off in a lot of tangents. So you can think about it too as like asking your data questions. It's a piece of paper, but you're kind of trying to get information from it. So what are people doing? What are they trying to accomplish? How are they doing this? What meanings and strategies do they use? How do participants or people talk about, characterize, and understand what's going on? So step 1 is called initial coding. And so this takes each line of data or each sentence or each pattern, like one thing at a time, each thought pattern, excuse me. So you're trying to label each one of these things and asking, what does this data suggest? What ideas are here? You really want to stick closely to the language the participants use at this stage. So recall back to our activity that we did in class about cohabitation. But remain open, keeping your research question in mind. Codes should be gerund, which you can think about active words, ing words, and this helps make your coding really an active process and to see what your participants are doing. So maybe they're thinking about something, they're going somewhere, those types of words. And then when is your coding process done? Well, Sharma says it's after you think you found a strong analytic direction. Like I said, it's pretty, it can feel very abstract and very overwhelming. Step 2 will be focused coding. So after you've done all of your initial coding in one document or one transcription, you want to engage in focused coding. Let me move myself here. So this means to use the most frequent or most significant codes to sort, synthesize, integrate, and organize large amounts of data. And so this is a way that you're kind of, this is how you're organizing your codes, essentially. That's why using the doc tools thing and putting it into Excel and then really like thinking about your codes in this way. That's why that can be helpful. So how does it make, what can we make sense? How can we group things together? How can we group ideas together? Can we kind of like pull them apart and reorganize them? Are some of the initial codes just not really going to make it? We're trying to think about taking our codes into the more abstract level. What's kind of going on here? So as a researcher, you have to make decisions. What do you want to include? What do you not want to include? And I think, and don't think about it as a linear process. You're going to go back and rethink about some things. You might be, coding your third interview and think, I think, something happened in my first interview that I missed. So you might need to go back to that. In terms of memo writing, I just want to share this with you. You should do this, but I'm not requiring you to turn it in. So it begins with your focused codes, that you're thinking about your codes as puzzle pieces, and your memos are ways that you're trying to fit all those puzzle pieces together to figure out like what's going on here. So I've got a link in the PowerPoint to a memo example from some of my dissertation research. So your memos are a space for you to further analyze your focused codes. You might include quotes, You might include a link to a sources, a link to an idea, explanation of what your codes mean, link to other codes. Again, just different ways to put the puzzle piece together. Sharma says that memos vary, but you may do any of the following with a memo. So I'll read these. You might define each code or category by its analytic properties, spell out in detail processes subsumed by the codes or categories, make comparisons between data and data, data and codes, codes and codes, codes and categories, categories and categories. Bring raw data into the memo, provide sufficient empirical evidence to support your definition of the category and analytic claim about it, offer conjectures to check in the field setting, identify gaps in the analysis, interrogate a code or category by asking questions of it. Step 4 is then drafting your findings. So we're going to start moving towards our findings. What's going on here? So you look over your memos to kind of figure out, what's emerged? What are the 3 most prominent themes? What's really standing out? And remember that research question. Oh shoot, I forgot to change this word to family. Not surprising, this is the same type of research project that the Deviant students are doing. So what makes the most sense to include in a family paper? What themes relate to and answer your research question? Remember that not all your findings or codes will make it into the paper. And I think when I realized this, it gave me a huge sense of relief that you're finding actually so much more than you could actually put into a paper. So you get to choose, what do you want to include, and in terms of your themes and what answers your research question. So here are your next steps with the project. You should be in the process of interviewing people. I would really recommend when you complete an interview that you back up your audio files, because that's the worst, to lose an audio file, because that's so much work. Start transcribing then. I would recommend to do a little at a time. Remember the previous workshop. If you need to go back to that, do not procrastinate. Having to do hours of transcription at the end is just awful. So you've got your first coded transcript due on Sunday night, April 12th at 11:55 p.m. So just to keep in mind before then, looking at your schedule, the interview has to be done. The audio has to be transcribed. The transcription has to be coded with initial and focus codes. And then whatever your project ended up looking like, if it's a Microsoft Word document, if it's a Google Doc, if it's you decide to print it out and hand code it, which I don't recommend, but some people still do that. Maybe you're scanning those pages or something. Whatever yours looks like, that's what you should upload there for that assignment. And then workshop 4A will be the week of the 13th through the 19th. And so this is where we start researching our topic. So the reason we need to be done with at least one interview here, a coded interview, is that you need to start researching those themes. So even if your project is about housework, you might not just be looking up housework, but you might be looking about emotional satisfaction in a marriage. Maybe that's what emerged in your interviews. And so that's what's next. And let me know as you work on this and as you have questions. Remember, it's a messy process. It's hard, but I think that I believe that we can work through it.